Good morning. Today we are going to start a new chapter which is expenditure multiplier. Or known as Keynesian model. Before starting our chapter, let's review the circular flow model. As we said before, circular flow model shows the relationship between the four sectors in the economy. There are four sectors: household and businessmen, and there are government and rest of the world, and there are three markets: factor market, goods and services market, and financial market. As you said, households are going to provide services to factors of production, through factor market to businessmen, and they are going to get income in return. Households are going to use their money income in spending on goods and services, which is consumption expenditure, paying taxes to the government, which is tax, and save the rest of their money in the financial markets, and it's known as saving. Households are going to pay consumption expenditure or price of goods and services through goods and service market to businessmen. Government will use taxes, which is the main source of income for the government, in order to buy goods and services, and this is known as government expenditure from businessmen through goods and services market. If the government witnesses a surplus or shortage, this can be financed through the financial market, lending and borrowing. Rest of the world, they are going to trade with the country through export and import, or net exports. And they are going to lend and borrow the country through the financial market. Finally, businessmen are going to collect all their money income received from consumption price of goods sold for consumption expenditure, for government expenditure, and the net exports in order to invest. So they are going to buy goods and services in the form of investment expenditure from goods and services market, and this will be returned back to them. And if there is any surplus or shortage, this will be financed through borrowing from financial market. From this figure, we can find that this is GDP using expenditure approach. So GDP equal expenditure. At the same time, this expenditure is derived from income received by households. So GDP will represent income, and at the same time, goods and services bought by the four sectors will be produced by businessmen, so it represents total production of the country. So this figure shows that GDP equals total expenditure, or known as aggregate expenditure, equals total income or aggregate income, and finally total production. According to Keynes, we are going to focus on the economy in the short run. So there are two main assumptions. Price level is fixed. Fixed prices means that there is no inflation, there is no change in the price. And number two, aggregate demand, which is total demand, determines real GDP. As we said before, real GDP is calculated as nominal GDP divided by GDP deflator. As prices is fixed, price level is fixed, so nominal will be equivalent to real GDP. So the figure, the previous figure, shows that real GDP equals aggregate expenditure equals aggregate income equals aggregate production. This is in the short run, as prices are fixed. Okay, so we can say that Y, which is income, equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Do you think income will affect consumption or GDP in general, or vice versa? Actually, it is a two-way relationship. If income increases, household will increase their spending on goods and services, which is consumption expenditure. And the consumption expenditure is one of the components of GDP. So GDP will increase and total income will increase. And the same with respect to inputs. If income increases, people would like to buy more goods and services imported from abroad. And as there is a negative relationship, so Y will decrease. So the relationship between income and aggregate demand or aggregate expenditure is a two-way relationship through consumption and import. But what about I, G, and X? I, G, and X are exogenous factors. What's meant by exogenous? Doesn't depend on income. So I doesn't depend on income, G doesn't depend on income, and so on. So exogenous means given, determined outside the equation or the model. So now we are going to start with C. We would like to know how C is affected by income and how it will affect income as well. C, which is consumption expenditure or consumption function. Consumption function is a function of income, which means, returning back to the circular flow model, as we said before, households are going to provide their services to businessmen through the factor market and get income in return. They are going to spend income on consumption. So income will affect the level of consumption. So if income increases, consumption will increase as well. So the relationship between income and consumption is a positive relationship. From the circular flow model, households are going to distribute their money income between consumption, saving, and taxes. So if you are going to deduct taxes from income, so the rest will be distributed between consumption and savings. This is known as disposable income. So YD, which is disposable income, will be distributed between consumption and savings. Let's start with an example when there is no government. So there is no taxes in the country. Households are going to distribute their income between consumption and savings. Okay, this schedule shows the relationship between income and consumption. As income increases, consumption is going to increase as well. So we can write it as y equals A plus, C equals A plus small c y. A is the intercept, which is value of consumption when income equals 0. Y is income and C is the slope, which is a change in consumption due to change in income by 1 unit. So if you would like to convert this schedule to equation, it will be C equals, when y equals 0, C equals 2. So A equals 2 plus the slope. You have to calculate the slope, change in C divided by change in Y. Change in C is 1 divided by 2. 1 divided by 2. 1 divided by 2. So it's half y. So this is consumption function. consumption function states that if income equals 0, consumption will be 2. If income increase by 1, consumption will increase by 0.5 units. Graphical. Disposable income will be on the x-axis. Sorry, income will be on the x-axis, and the consumption y-axis. If income equals 0, consumption will be 2. 0 and 2. And then, if income increase by 1, consumption will increase by 0.5. So we are going to substitute in the equation by 5, for example, 6, for example. 6 multiplied by half, which is 3, plus 2, 5. 3 and 5. So this is the consumption function. It is positively sloped. It is going to start. It's not going to start from the origin. Okay? Okay. Now let's assume that there is government and taxes.